Here we go. This is better. There was a glitch on the other stream. Sorry about that. We're just gonna re send the links. Make sure everybody follows the good link. So we have here with my link, which is a new link. New link, live show. I played with some settings, and I think that screwed up a little bit of what was happening for the show. Let's just make sure. Here we go, guys. Just wanted to make sure everybody knows that there's a new stream started. Little glitch. It happens, apparently. A little glitch that seemed to happen. Here we go. So I was playing with settings, but the way that the audio is done and the way that the streaming is done, actually, what I forgot is that in this way of streaming, if I change settings, it messes up the streaming side of things. So it could be no video or no sound or all sorts of weird things. And I was seeing weird things on my side, so I thought, no, let's start with 0. So here's everybody. Welcome aboard. Take number 2, apparently. That's the good side of being a tech guy or an old tech guy. It's easy to get back on your feet streaming. So welcome, everybody. Just going to make sure that this is all right here and this is positioned here. And we're going to start our live stream now. And here we go. So here we go, guys. Welcome aboard. This is the live stream where we talk about radio, shortwave radio, and all sorts of radios in general. It's always nice to be here. Always nice to have all of you on board. And this is kind of cool to have all of you every week on what is a great opportunity to stream. Oh, this is kind of nice if I do these. And I take this, and here we go. Oh, this is nice. Enjoying a new feature of Windows 11 that snaps so well all the things together. So, okay. Welcome aboard. We are live twice a week. My name is Gilles, located in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. We are here twice a week on Wednesday at 0 hours UTC, Thursday, technically for the rest of the world, because UTC is Thursday at 0 UT. But it's Wednesday evening for North America. And we are here on Saturday at 20 hours Universal Time, and that's 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Talk about radio, shortwave radio, just enjoy radio. A great gang of people that I had a chance to see some of your faces this Sunday, and it was really cool. So for those that participated, it was great to see all of you on the Zoom meeting this last Sunday. So really, really nice to have all of you. And it was an honor to meet you a little more. Know you are. See faces that I've never seen before. And of course, there'll be another one of those Zooms in the near future in a few months from now. It was kind of an experiment and went well, considering the amount of people that registered, considering the amount of people we had at a certain point. pretty orderly and pretty good. It was a little long. Sorry, guys. It was a little long to get into, get to everybody because there were so many people there that by the time you go to and get to that person, it was a little long. So I was worried a little bit at the beginning that maybe some of you would kind of be a little put off by the fact that it takes a long time for me to actually get to you personally. But we finally made it through all of the people that went there. It was a lot of fun. Lasted a little more than 3 hours, and it was really cool to be able to meet you guys and have a little more of an insight of who you are, all of you. It was really, really nice to be able to grasp a little more of everybody that is here and joining me and having fun with radio. Really was a great, great moment on Sunday and went by real fast too. So there's by the way, I was listening, there's Radio Thailand 15590 coming in at 0 hours UT. There's also WWV. I was surprised. WWV was actually coming in on 25 megahertz, still at 0 hours universal time. Kind of shows that high solar flux is really, really improving to higher frequencies. So propagation has been pretty good today, except for that moment. There was an X flare this afternoon, that an X.3 flare around 1730 UT. So for about an hour, signals kind of disappeared on the daylight side of Earth, which usually happens with a flare, and especially an X flare. And about an hour later, things came back to normal. We know that there's a coronal mass ejection with that. Also, we're waiting in the next hours for the arrival of a kind of a series of punches from a series of coronal mass ejections from different solar flares that happened a few days ago. So there were so many of them that it's going to pack probably a big punch. So if propagation during the show or later tonight starts being weird, go outside and look for auroras if your sky is clear. Here it isn't. We're starting to have snow and on ice. We're supposed to have freezing rain tonight. But that could trigger, as they say, up to a G3 class geomagnetic storm, which means auroras will be visible in a pretty wide range of areas when that actually happens. So we're waiting for the arrival of that, and we'll talk a little more about the solar activity and the effects because we've had I've had quite a few comments, and I've had actually a message from someone that was asking a little more detail of the effects of the sun and propagation. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. I think it's relevant to do so. So there's a beautiful chat room, wonderful people. If you have a Gmail account, you can join in, say hello, and hey, you guys kind of know each other a little more with the Zoom meeting, and it was a lot of fun to be there. Sorry for those that weren't there. You missed a great time to meet other people that listen to the radio, and a great, great moment where it was a lot of fun together. There's also a Facebook group. The Facebook group is when it's the after party, when it's over here for the rest of the week and the rest of the time when nothing is happening in the live shows. You have the Facebook group. You can go. People are sharing what they're listening to, radios they're using, information about shortwave, about radio in general, asking questions, answering questions. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great group to be and to have fun with over there on the Facebook group. So it's pretty nice place to be. So Mark Cope, WA5153 is WL in Dallas, Texas. Nice to have you here. Keegan, it's nice to meet you in person and see a face. Like San ADXer in Northwest Arkansas. David, KJ4CMY, nice to have you on board. And because I didn't want to. A couple of you have told me that you were hearing me, but since I didn't have a level indication, I don't want to take a chance because without a level in my face to tell me that telling me there's something happening audio wise, You never know what could happen, and I didn't want to take the chance of maybe I'm not there, and if I'm there, maybe it's gonna cut off at some point, and I'll not know it. Where here, at least with the level indication, if it cuts off, I will know. So I didn't want to take any chances, if even though maybe it was okay. So, anyways, we're back. We're back on that new link. What else do we have? So Keegan is listening with is Ethon Greenwich Edition Field BT Radio and Ethon Greenwich Edition Satellite with SSB. Bobby Burgess, nice to have you here from Morgan City, Louisiana. WA5107 is WL. Rob in Phoenix, Arizona, nice to have you here. We have Mad Max 2069, nice to have you on board. Al Mason, nice to have you on board. Russ Gladden, nice to have you here from Ottawa. Dwayne, nice to have you on board. Gabriel from Uruguay, nice to have you on board. And it was nice to see you on the Zoom meeting. Chuck Schreiber, nice to have you here, Chuck, and 5KVO from South Texas. Rob, nice to have you here. Says audio and video seems okay now. Dave Conte, nice to have you on board from the Bronx, New York. Radio Amazon back on 11780. Cool. Probably had some little problems with their transmitters. Brent, VE3GXD, nice to have you on board from Rockville, Ontario. Really enjoyed the Zoom meeting on Sunday. Thanks to you and Sheldon. It was a lot of fun to see all of you guys. Brent, we've met at the CIDX barbecue in person a few years ago. So that was nice to see you again, at least on the Zoom meeting, have you again on the Zoom meeting. But we've met in person, which is even better than a Zoom meeting, but it's pretty cool to have everybody here. Tristan, nice to have you here from Newfoundland. We have Almy Sam asking what's the net on 6833.5. Let's check that out. I'm going to put a little bit of volume. The sound you're hearing is coming out of my my SDR, the S5HF Plus. Yeah, there's definitely some people there.
Juliet, 5 Echoes on the roll. 2 moved to Mike 047, Mike 047, and the contact with 5 Hotel Kilo, over. Wilco moving to Mike 047, so send contact 5 Hotel Kilo, out.
It's kind of interesting. 6833.5. I'm just going to check if I have a little bit of info here. These are interesting call signs, actually. These are interesting call signs. I don't know if anybody has an idea. I've got nothing here on that particular frequency. And it doesn't sound like call signs you'd hear on a Mars network. They're kind of different. Mars network usually has a lot of... the different call signs have a lot of lettering in it, like, like AAA47, whatever. Kind of interesting. So I don't know if anybody can give us a little idea of what that could be on 6833.5, but I'm hearing it here. Definitely some stations making some calls. I don't know. It could be Civil Air Patrol or any other U.S. Other U.S. Networks of some sort. DP PBRSTG. Nice to have you here from Northern Green Mountains of Vermont. Gary, 24 fan. Nice to have you here. Zen Pharaohs. Nice to have you on board with a bowl of oatmeal and with ginger. Cool. Doesn't know which radio to choose. That's a good dilemma when you don't know what radio to choose. Francis Moore. Nice to have you here from the UK. What else do we have? Artist Autocrafter's Kitchen. Nice to have you here from Massachusetts. Enjoyed the Sunday Zoom. Wish I had said more, but followed the rules and had to be mindful of how many others were on. Yeah, that it's next time we'll have a different. We'll ask or have you guys interact with different questions and stuff. The biggest problem was there's a lot of people, and what we were scared of is if too many people ramble on for too long, it's going to make a meeting that's so long that some people will just be tired before we get to them. Also, you had to be mindful of if there are a lot of people showing up, this could be a very long thing to operate. And so, it doesn't show, but kind of being the guy that, the master of ceremonies, you get tired over time after, having to check everything, listen, moderate stuff and make sure that everything goes, according to plan. And, but it went well. Alan, nice to have you on board. Nice to have you on board. Let me just go here. I lost the okay. So Alan from the UK and listening to his DX394. Sam, I like it. I like the snaps that they offer for a quick setup. I actually like them a lot on Windows 11 personally. Roger Gibbs, nice to have you on board from a chilly UK. What do we have? Shelly, nice to have you here from South Central Pennsylvania. We have Barry, 11 meters on SSBs on fire this week. Tom DXer, WPE2QED from Hudson Valley, New York. Nice to have you here. Miki Dalmage, nice to have you here from Sherwood Park, Alberta, Canada. Jeff King from Jacksonville, Florida. Still at work, trying to listen in. Cool. Don't get caught. TVDXer, salut. J'espère que ça va bien toi aussi. Ça va très bien. David says, David KJ4CMY, Zoom meeting was nice, but people had to see my face. That's like listening to your voice. I am totally used to it now. So for me, it isn't weird to listen to it anymore. But anybody that has recorded his voice and listens to it after are all like, whoa, I sound like that? And it is always kind of weird. And it's always kind of what makes a lot of people a little shy to talk. Because when they hear themselves, they're like, oh, God, I didn't know I listened. I didn't know I sounded like that. So it's it's something you get used to. I'm used to my voice. I hear it all the time now, so I got to get used to it. And well, got to get used to my face. At least there's mirrors. We see our faces all the time. It's not as a big shock like your voice. Your voice, I think, is definitely one of the first things people notice in listening to themselves in a recording. I remember when I started making YouTube videos and I was like, oh, God, I got to listen to myself over and over again to make sure that everything's all right. It's like, this is painful. What else do we have? PBRSTG says, the Zoom meeting went well. Wish I could have stayed longer. No problem. It was, you stay the length that you can. That's fine. It's like the live shows here, I don't expect everybody to be here for 3 hours total all the time. There's an off and on thing. I watch a couple of podcasts that are like 2 hours long every week. they're tech podcasts, and I'm it's kind of an off and on thing. I can imagine you guys doing that. You might leave it running, but you'll go off do something in certain times, or sometimes that's a lot what I do. I will take a moment where that is the time when, okay, that's not as interesting. I'll go off, do something else temporarily, and come back while that subject is on. I think we all work in pretty much the same way like that. Francis Moore picked up the mint Sony ICF 7600 for £50. So yeah, it is. It's known to be one of the good Sony portables. At that price, you got a great price, and you got a great radio, honestly. Rick from Milwaukee, nice to have you here. Dwayne, sorry did not show up on Zoom. I never had a computer and know nothing about them, so I had trouble getting on Zoom. No problem. No problem. They'll be next time, anyways. So for sure. Keegan says, I thought I sounded a little nervous when I first spoke. Well, it's normal that you might, when you're not used to being in a meeting with other people, it's kind of normal that you might be a little kind of a little shyish, or maybe talk a little fast, or it's normal stuff. It's they said, I think in a survey they said that the number one thing that people are afraid of is to talk in front of a crowd. Obviously, that's not my problem, but it used to. I remember, being like, totally afraid of going in front of a class or in front of a group and talk. It was like, whoa, I don't see myself doing that. Well, that's what I do for a living. Well, kind of. I talk to everybody on YouTube, so it's normal. It's when it's not something you do every day. And all I gotta say, Keegan, is that you did just fine. You were great on camera. You were perfect. You did it so well. You don't even have to think about it twice. You're great. But I think everybody's a little nervous. Some are less than others because some might have done other Zooms before with other people. Some people are more comfortable with others, but some people are nervous of talking with another crowd and with a lot of people watching. It's okay. Brad, nice to have you here. N5LUL WA512 5192 SWL. Pretty cool to have you here from Texas. What else do we have? Barry, Austria was heard on 27385 lower sidewind yesterday, and I was able to post it on my channel. Great conditions on 11 meters. Cool. Usually when the conditions are right, Europe to North America on 11 meters is an easy thing. A lot of stations. Soroflex like 150 this week. I don't know tonight. What's the new number tonight? Let's just check it out quickly here. If I look at the number tonight, we are at 149 Soroflex. That's high. Last time I had seen the Soroflex at 150 plus. It was many years ago now. So really cool. I had that shows you that higher frequencies are on fire at that with that solar flux. The solar activity is really, really good. Really nice to see that. What else do we have? We just go down here. William Garrow, nice to have you here from Newton Falls, Ohio. KC8ZVH. Bob, greetings from Northeast Ohio. Received his Texan PL330 today. Just needed another toy to play around with. That's cool. Paul, VT Radio, AA1SU from Northern Vermont. Nice to have you on board. Just blew up my antenna switch somehow. Oh, so sad. Hugo, nice to have you here from South California. What else do we have? Matt, MDK2, nice to have you here from Denver. What else do we have? Tom DXer says, tells Keegan, I've given 50 speeches to groups over my business career, with the biggest group being 200. I still get nervous. So, it's normal. It's, addressing other people, addressing a crowd in any way, even through a virtual meeting, for most people is a stressful event. I've overcome the stress of live and talking to a group, I guess, because of the very high amount of live shows that I did. And now, and plus, I enjoy singing at the karaoke in front of crowd. So these two things together means that being in front of a crowd doing something is now such a common thing that it kind of, I don't have that fear anymore. I would, if I'd meet you guys in person and have to entertain you, maybe in a real, kind of a in person in a group meeting of some sort, maybe I would be a little more nervous because of the more, I don't know why, the personal environment where being in front of people. When I did the live shows from the CIDX barbecue in the summer, although I wasn't really that stressed, it was more stressful to do it there because there was a crowd of people there watching me in person, which is a very different thing. This, I don't see you guys. The Zoom meeting would have been probably more stressful technically, because now I could see you guys. And for some reason, when there's a contact, you see me, I see you. It's different. But here, even though you guys interact, I don't really see you guys. I only see my face on the screen, so it's kind of, I'm talking to myself. But still, it's I remember the first live that I did. I was stressed. The first live I did for YouTube, that was kind of a stressful thing. And the first few are a little stressful, but it wasn't that high stressful once again, because I'm used to karaoke singing in front of people. So I guess I got used to doing it so many times. But even that, there's an artist that was interviewed many years ago, and I think it was Barbara Streisand, and she was interviewed a few years ago, and they were talking about, because she was saying that she was very stressed just before going on stage, and for me that was a weird thing to hear from somebody like that, because for me it's like, well, you're stressed, you're still today stressed at being on stage performing with all the years and all the concerts you did. And she said, and so they talked about that, and she said, you know what, that she never came over the fact that before going on stage she's stressed, and it never changed. It was always there. And even today, after all those concerts, she still has, to deal with the stress of going on stage. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. As if some people just don't get over that stress part, maybe. I don't know. But anyways, it's totally normal to be stressed out and talking to people in front of people in groups and stuff. Michael, nice to have you here from the Garden State, New Jersey, USA. RJDA Dakota, nice to have you on board. WA0113 SWL. Alice there, nice to have you on board from the Pacific Northwest. Greg, I watch on YouTube Tom's Radio Room. Solar Flux above 150. Turn on your radios. Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that is interesting on YouTube. Definitely. Wolf Grounded, nice to have you here from chilly South Jersey. Mentalunar, curious, if you didn't have a YouTube channel to review radios on, would you still have collected as many radios over the last 10 years? Pretty good question. Let's say that I would have probably purchased a few more, yes, but I would probably have been more careful in what I would have chosen. I would have purchased the ones that I know after being, reading about them are some of the best. Would I have all of those radios I have now? I don't think so. Before I got to do the YouTube stuff, I had purchased maybe 2 or 3 radios off of eBay because I was surprised at the price. I still remember the first time I came across a Texan PL 600, which was one of the first kind of mid-range Texan receivers. I was amazed at a radio with PLL technology and a frequency display cost less than $100 because it came back in that day when I purchased the Texan PL 600. The Canadian dollar was at par with the US dollar. So $1 US was $1 Canadian dollar. There's pretty much no difference. There was even a short period of time where the Canadian dollar actually was worth more than US dollar for a while. So when I would go on eBay, a $70 US radio was $70 Canadian. So that made me buy a few radios back then because it was just so so inexpensive. And the Texan PL 600 kind of amazed me because I remember it came to, in all, with the shipping, and I remember I had to pay the taxes on it when you got here, the sales tax. It got to about 105 Canadian dollars back then, which was for me very inexpensive because I couldn't see a PLL synthesized receiver with SSB and digital display at such a low price. The last radio before that I purchased as a portable was probably the Grande G5 or something like that, and it had cost like 150 Canadian dollars. So I was kind of a little surprised how that was inexpensive, and that made me curious as to how it performs. So I actually made me buy it because I was just very curious about it. So I got a couple of radios in that way because of that. And I got probably a few radios because when the dollar was at par, it was so inexpensive suddenly to get some of the Chinese portables that I did get a few because of that back then. If I did not have the channel, I would not have continued buying that many. I would have probably purchased a few more, definitely. But I would have chosen wisely which ones. Having the channel here made me, I'm not choosing necessarily. I will choose sometimes because I know people will want that or this reviewed or my personal opinion of a specific one. But most of the time, I will just purchase out of the blue. It's like, oh, that looks cool. Click, buy. And that definitely has to do with the channel, where I have more possibility of buying these receivers. So no, there would not be as many radios without it. That's for sure. That's for sure. Marie-Noël Desbois. Bonsoir. Nice to have you on board. RJD Dakota. Next time past Sunday at the Zoom meeting. Zen Pharaohs 13795. All in your radio now. Let me just check. I'm gonna bring up. Forgot to bring it up before, but I actually am using the HFCC list that I downloaded as my main driver of what is out there. So according to the HFCC, let me just check that out. I'm going to move this here. Make it bigger. Okay, so 13795 at don't know. According to HFCC, there's nothing there right now. So don't know. Let me check it out here. Do I hear it? Can't wait to get the regular schedules back in order. 13795. Hearing anything there? Yeah, there's definitely a strong signal there. That seems like by the style of music. By the style of music, I would say that is All India Radio. And I'm only that's only because of the music. I'm pretty sure that must be All India Radio. Absolutely. So Jason Francis, nice to have you here from Ottawa, Ontario, as usual. What else do we have? Chris Swordman, GMRS. Yes, what about GMRS? Rolf Cramden says New York Times did a story on ham operators listening in on Russian commanders on the Ukraine battlefield due to failure of their coded communications. Yeah, I saw that. Somebody posted that article actually on one of the Facebook groups. Kind of fun to have. It doesn't happen often that we get regular news outlets talk about ham radio and shortwave. Here in Montreal, one of the local stations, unfortunately, I should have been the guy talking on that station. They got this goofy ham radio operator that didn't know half of whatever he was talking about. He didn't even know. Honestly, you want to see how dumb it was? I don't know who proposed that guy to be on the radio to talk about radio, shortwave radio, and Ukraine and Russia. He didn't even seem to know that the HF bands were shortwave. For him in his head, shortwave and HF bands were two things. And he seemed clueless and lost. I was embarrassed to listen to that. And I actually wrote into the station to let them know, look at my channel and look at me. And if you need an expert in what shortwave is, I think I'm the guy that you should, maybe ask. Never came back. I don't know. It was bad. Honestly, it was like, yeah, that was the worst thing ever on the radio. And that's one of the most listened to FM outlets, news outlets here in Montreal. It was really bad. James, WA1125SWL, good evening from Prospect, Connecticut. Nice to have you here. And what else do we have? Marie-Noël is in New Carlisle, Gaspésie, Quebec. Cool. Nice to have you on board. Pretty cool. I'm having more and more people from the province of Quebec watching me. People are talking. John Beckham, nice to have you here from Northeast Florida. And of course, for those that don't know yet, I'm in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, northeast part of North America. Patrick Moore gave a friend gave me 11 meter CB radio here in Costa Rica, but have been receiving lots of people in the southern US. Don't know how well they can hear me. Thanks for the show. Always looking forward. Well, with higher propagation, you might be surprised. Might be surprised at how well it could actually reach US and even Europe. Who knows? Dimitri, nice to have you here. John Harmakar, nice to have you here from Northeast Ohio. Carl Icon, 6754. Trenton Military Weather. Yeah, I was seeing it actually on the waterfall. 6754. That's Trenton Military. Break. Halifax.
Time 0000.
So that's the
Wind
Trenton,
270.
Ontario, Canada Military Weather Station broadcasting. They have two frequencies to broadcast on. On the daytime, 15034, which I get from time to time, but not that often, and 6754 in the evening. So that's Trenton Military. DJW883, nice to have you here from Southeast Pennsylvania. And says, nice Zoom meeting. Thanks. Cool. Christian Marcoux, salut. Nice to have you on board. And says, I had a meeting and now I'm out of that. Retirement, baby. Richard, nice to have you here. Richard says, from an ice cold upstate New York, I was as nervous as if I never spoke before. Hey, don't worry about it. Everybody did fine. No one looked nervous. Everybody looked just great and natural. And I found it really, really nice to see you guys and have you guys talk a little bit about who you are. Larry Gilmore. Had a great time Sunday. It was absolutely awesome to see and be with everyone. Great job. Kudos to all. Cool. WF7I Homebrew Bert, nice to have you on board from rural Virginia. Call me Hawkeye. KF0 GGZ, nice to have you here from Iowa. Zen Pharaoh, Sony ICF 7600 GR, excellent radio. Joe Runman, nice to have you here from Chicago suburbs. Rufus, nice to have you here from Slippery, Laurentian Valley, Ontario, VE3055SWL. I guess that's what's going to happen to us tonight. Freezing rain warning here tonight. I see a couple of snowflakes right now falling down. Michael Hanger, nice to have you on board. Illinois. J Dakota, past couple of days have been spectacular as far as radio experience is concerned. Dimitri, I started using my Realistic DX100 receiver in my workplace. So that's cool. I need to take mine out and play around with it a little bit. Matt, I thought SolarFlux got up to 150 plus a few months ago. Can't recall for sure. Now, the highest I can remember in the last year, and I might be wrong, but I don't think it went much more than, I've seen it maybe at 120, 130-ish. I don't recall 150 plus in the last few months. But, I might be wrong. Who knows? So, yeah, that famous X flare that was like really powerful. That was pretty crazy. The highest solar flux I've ever seen in my whole life, and I still remember by heart because I had this weird focus on solar flux in the 80s, and I jotted down in a log every day's solar flux from WWV at 18 minutes. And every month I would do a graph of the month. And at the end of the year, I'd do a graph for the year. So I don't know if I still have these. I should bring them out because they probably are a great representation of what solar activity was back then, and with the graphs of, I would probably, you could see the ups and downs of the solar cycles. The highest the solar flux I've seen, highest ever, 363. That was in probably in one of the cycles somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s. 363. Uh, Amazing. What else do we have? Matt says, been amazed at KBS World Radio on 15575. So not enough to copy here, but it definitely reaching a point further east from Colorado. I need to get up a little earlier. 13 UT is 9 a.m. I should kick my butt and wake up tomorrow morning to listen to that. Matt, voice of Greece, it's still on 9420. We'll see if it's still there on Friday or Saturday, I guess. Let's cross our fingers because it'd be kind of sad to lose that, honestly. Brent, you did a great job the last CJX barbecue, and I appreciate what you were saying about the different dynamic of YouTube versus in person. Yeah, it is different. It is totally different. I mean, having people in front of your face, Zoom is, you got people in front of your face, but it's still not totally being in front of the people. There's kind of, even though you see, like on Sunday, I saw you guys and I wasn't nervous. I was, it's like what maybe the biggest stress for me was not to talk to you guys or see you guys, was to hopefully manage it well so that it goes smoothly through it, and I listen to you guys and make sure the interaction's fine. And there a bit of, there was a couple of times where I had the impression that maybe I cut off someone, and it was like, maybe I went too fast, but um that was more of the stress of managing it than being in front of anyone. But even though Zoom, you see the people, you see the faces, um there's still a barrier. You still see that there's kind of something there that's just, there's a little something still missing for the in-person thing. That's why it's easy to understand why in-person meeting is different from even a Zoom meeting, even though it's a pretty good way of meeting people still. But it's it was fun. James WA for 1125 is WL. I'm great talking to myself. Well, it's almost that, it's like I see the chat room, but I see my face on the screen. And the first thing you're like, yeah, it's like, well, talking to myself in the mirror. JD Dakota, Radio New Zealand was great last night on 15720. I've been playing with these two little radios here. I'm gonna actually change the camera's angle to you guys. So I got the two the CountyCom and the Texan PL368 together with the external antenna here. And I've been playing with that and doing some ETM scans. A lot of ETM scans, actually. I did a lot of them this afternoon while doing other stuff. And I did a lot of them last night. Like every half hour, I would do an ETM scan and see what the radios actually stop on. And around 3:30 UTC, which is about 11:30 p.m. here, they started stopping on 15720 with Radio New Zealand being there. It's kind of nice. With a higher solar flux, definitely it's helping out. Yeah, 11780 back on the air. Radio Nacional Amazonas. Cool. That is nice. Chastank, nice to have you on board from Louisville, Kentucky. 84 Fahrenheit over there. Woohoo. Dave Summer, if you're talking about Trenton Military, 6754 kilohertz upper sideband. 6754 kilohertz upper sideband for the Trenton military. Jim from Rhode Island. Nice to have you on board. Great Zoom call on Sunday. Cool. Hope you guys that participated had a lot of fun. I had fun. I found it so cool to and it's always the same thing. The same thing, and it's the when you don't see you just have people in a chat room and have never seen people, or even if you have just heard the voice of someone, we all make ourselves kind of an image of what you might look like. Maybe not through a chat room because it doesn't have a lot of information except the general, you know, text of what you're sharing. But especially when somebody talks and you've never seen, you talk to someone on the phone for ages, you never met that person, and then you see the person, you see your face, and you're like, that is so not how I imagined that guy. For me, that happens. It happens so many times because people hear my big voice. You know, some people say, "Oh, you got a great radio voice," and they totally flip out when they see me. They're like, "Wow, with that big voice, I would not have imagined you like that." And I guess it's normal. We always we make an image based on voice, and we have no information in reality in a voice except the voice and being, the person, the type of person maybe that they are in the way they talk and react and reflect on the world. But you can't, there's no information about what you look like. But we still, we make ourselves an image. And then you see these people and you're like, wow, I never thought you'd look like that. It's just so funny how we create ourselves an image of everybody else based on so little information, too. Keegan had some in-state tropo FM late last night before I went to bed, just after 2 this morning. Little Rock and Hot Springs, Arkansas area. Cool. You're a big FMDXer. I like that. We all have our radio thing that turns us on. FMDXing, AM medium wave DXing for some. Some are on long wave. Some is strictly shortwave. Some could be, VHF, UHF, of all sorts of things, weird things, and whatever. And it's cool. That is what is actually cool about all of this, is that we have fun with radio in different ways, and that is cool. Rufus was an audio tech for a few bands over 20 years. My stomach would be flipping before every show. Check. Oh, man. Michael, with my Ethon 715 Radio Shack St. Jim. Rifleman 336 from Southwest Ohio and 8 UCN. Do worry about speaking in front of crowds unless Will Smith is in the audience. Maybe if Will Smith is there and I do a bad shortwave joke, he's gonna come and smack me. That's the talk of the week, I guess. Well, it put the Oscars in the spotlight. I had a friend of mine that was like, I didn't even know the Oscars were there until they talked about that. Well, now everybody knows the Oscars happened on Sunday. Matt says we had snowflakes and broad daylight here this morning. Weather was strange today. Alice, there, new and still learning. Is there any easy way to detect inbound CMEs from the sun with our radios, like will be occurring tonight? You know what? What we're gonna, I'm just gonna go down the chat and we're gonna talk about. I'll keep that question with all of what we're going to talk about in solar activity, effects that it could have, and I think it's going to be an interesting discussion as the sun is kind of having a lot of stuff. So stay here, and I'm going to try to not take too much time. I'm not that far back in the chat room in 15 minutes, so it's should be okay unless I start rambling around. 13795 Matt for the All India station. It really did sound like All India Radio. It really had the kind of music and the kind of feel that I hear of All India Radio most of the times. No, I've not heard from that station. They didn't come back to me because I send them an email. I sent an email to 3 different people and let them know that it was like, come on, Francis Moore, which is your go-to radio receiver, ICOM or Yaesu that you have or would like to have? I am not sure what to go for. Honestly, I'm big fan of SDRs now, and I got a Kenwood R5000 and an ICOM ICR 8500 here in the back, doing nothing. Gives you an idea. Miki Dalmage, Sri Lanka, big on 11905. Wow, pretty cool. Yarabamba, nice to have you here from Ontario. Everywhere I am reading that shortwave radio is making a comeback. Great. Well, there's more talk about it for sure. Mita Lunar, do you play around with CB radio much? Unfortunately, I've gotten my 980 SSB, my Bearcat 980 SSB here that is unplugged, and I need to plug back and make contacts with because I want to use it a little more. You know why it's unplugged? Because when I got my ham license, I put the priority on plugging my Yaesu FT450 transceiver to make contacts on the HF bands, and so I unplugged the 980 SSB at the time, but I need to plug it back in for sure. Mark Twain, nice to have you on board. Well, it's supposed to be a G3, according to what they think is going to be a G3 geomagnetic storm. So it's not going to knock off much of our planetary communications, but shortwave will be messed up probably. At G3 level, it's going to be messed up. NASA plane crazy. If you want to listen to WWV, spend just a little more. And if that's the focus because of some astronomy or whatever, you need to listen to WWV, go a little more and get something like the Radiwao R108. It'll be a better radio for everything and especially for WWV. The Reticus V115 has one big problem. The internal circuitry makes a lot of noise. So it's not the best of receivers you can get, even though it's very cheap for the price. Just thanks cleaning out the garage and found my 10-meter transceiver. Still in the box I got from Radio Shack. Wow. WM7I Homebrew says the person I found to be among the most interesting on the Zoom was the guy in his 90s talking about listening to shortwave in the 30s during World War II. Incredible. Not sure if he joins the live chat. I got to say that people that have a lot of experience of the past and having stories of I would sit down and listen to someone that witnessed whatever events in the world of in World War II or in the 50s or 60s or 70s and talking about the radio experience he had with that. I would be just listening to that for hours. It is interesting, definitely. Especially, I like kind of some of the history stuff from the 19, like, the World War, stuff like that, the Cold War. I'm a fan of kind of all the documentaries about that. And somebody that has a radio or some radio stories that go with it. Oh man, I'm there. I'm listening. Barry, Canada's busy on CBSSB tonight. Channel 38 lower sideband. No, my CB is not, unfortunately, right now, because of my ham radio gear. Don't worry, I'm not pushing aside CB because of ham radio. It's just that it's the choice I had to make. John Beckham, excited about the solar flux and solar activity. Pretty cool. Greg, if my uncle was alive, I would buy him a shortwave receiver for his birthday. That would be a great gift, Greg. Nessa Plane Crazy is from New York City. About 140 in December of last year, says Bert. Yeah, I don't think it reached more. It didn't go to the 150 or something, but I remember there was a spike for a few days. It was a very quick spike that came down quickly. But kind of nice. Brian, nice to have you on board. VA7VEB. So many stations on shortwave this morning. Cool. Oh, man, I tried for half an hour on 15 meters at 21 UTC. There is a very strong station from Ireland on 15 meters. I tried to contact that station for half an hour on my Yaesu FT450. But what I realized is that although my antenna resonates very well on 80, 40, 20 meters, it seems to not work that great on 15. I could see that the power output is not as good. So it doesn't seem to be a very good 15-meter antenna for me. And even 10 meters is not that great. So it's kind of interesting. Maybe it's just the way that I put it up. But anyways, with the snow melting now, I'm soon to do a little bit of modifications to that NFEN antenna. I will be experimenting with some different little ways of installing it, and maybe even making that NFEN antenna much longer than it is right now. I've been looking at a lot of stuff on the internet to improve upon the design. What else do we have? Joseph, nice to have you on board from San Francisco Bay Area. And yeah, lots of things happening with the space weather today. John Beckham, 25 megahertz or 25,000 kilohertz WWV booming and through Northeast Florida. RJDA Dakota, 11780. Amazonia is back. Indeed it is. Michael, Jill, how good are you? Pronounce my name correct, even though I never mentioned it. I'm guessing you caught it on Zoom meeting. Amazing. Also shows your power of Zoom. Yeah, well, you correct. You or somebody with the same last name, but I think it's you, corrected my pronunciation. It's funny because first of all, one of the interesting things, and it's for more than just that, but there's a lot of stuff happening in pronunciation. Like when you see the names of somebody, first of all, my first language is French. So of course, if you're French, if your name has a French look to it, I might actually pronounce it, even though sometimes I know that in English there are French names, but you're not French or you don't speak French. It's just that somewhere in the family there were some probably some French speaking people at some point. One example is Leo Laporte, that has a tech guy stuff. You know, for me, it's La Porte because it is a French name. It's a name here, even here in Quebec, we have some La Porte. It's a last name that is common. So you got names like that, and so the fact that I have my French, the French names come up as pretty much French pronunciation for me, even though sometimes they have more of an English pronunciation of the French name. Then, of course, I've been speaking English for a long time, so I saw a lot of names over time. And then there's instinct. So when I see a name, I go with my gut feeling of the way it's written and what I think it might sound like or might be pronounced. And I'm sure there are probably a lot of you here in the chat room and in the live shows that have laughed a little bit of my pronunciation of some of the names, which is, you know, it's not always that easy. I remember one person I remember being surprised, MDK2, Matt Kelleher. I still remember one of the first times I had that guy in the chat room, and he coming back and being surprised that I was pronouncing his name correctly. And I mean, I've never had seen Kelleher before. I just went with my gut feeling of, well, I guess maybe that's how it's pronounced. But, you know, there are names I mess up for sure. And there are names I don't pronounce at all well, very, very well. It's just, but it's, that's why on the Zoom meeting, I was like, well, if you want to correct me on whatever name I'm calling you, I think it's time. Like, for example, Kamagzi, that I always say. Well, I distinctly heard that he's calling himself on the Zoom Kamikaze. I'm like, oh, look at that. Okay. I had that one wrong, Dr. Sisop, nice to have you here. CHU 3330, Strong S8. Rifleman 336 is programming his scanner tonight, a unit in BC 365. And so, pretty cool. Pretty cool. I will, Greg. Say Paul the cat. Say hi to Paul the cat. I promise. JD Dakota. JD Dakota says he loves his the form factor of the Conicon GP7. So what else do we have? Let me just go down here. Okay. So like I said, Nessa playing crazy, you better get a Radwell R108. You'll have a better chance of getting WWV on all of its frequency. John Beckham, 5995, very loud in Northeast Florida. It might be 5990 because I think it's China 5990. VT Radio, Paul, enjoyed the Zoom meeting. Yeah, it was nice to see your face. Put a face on who you are in the chat room. That's also cool. It's also cool. Others other crafters. I think the key to Zoom was limiting ourselves to one favorite radio. It was hard for many to do that. I get it, but it was a way for us to try to. It was Sheldon's idea, and it was a way for us to limit how long you're going to talk. It's not that we didn't want to hear from you. I would have loved to hear a lot more from all of you, but because of the fact that the longer everybody takes, the longer it's going to take. It's going to take time to go to the end. We had to find a way to limit it a little bit. Warp Hammer is getting Gander Vomit on 6604 from Newfoundland, Canada. What else do we have? What else do we have?
Time 0100 Zulu, wind 290 at 12, visibility 15, sky clear, temperature 1,
Um,
point -6, altimeter 298.
what else do we have? Let me go down here. Try to catch a little bit. Chestang, you're so right. That's the reason why so many radio stars and radio shows could not transition to the movies. Folks had a different image of what the stars look like. Yep, definitely. Definitely. The shortwave Oscars. Do that. The shortwave Oscars. Yeah, no problem, Mickey. That's the problem of being a little late in the chat. Sometimes you miss out on some of the transmissions. Uncle Jason, keep my wife's call sign out of your mouth. Oh man. Oh well. Oh, everybody. I think everybody everywhere around the world they were talking about that slap. For sure. The slap was heard around the world. That was a good slap. Oh man. Dmitry. Okay. What else do we have? What else do we have? Let's go down here. Matt says, I couldn't get away from that nonsense on social media. Can I ask to limit discussion of it here? Let's start a discussion. Who slapped who with a radio? That's going to be the real discussion. Somebody slapped Jill with a radio. No problem. Can I keep it? Dr. Sisop says, AM skipping tonight, 7:40 in Toronto, coming in strong. What else do we have? What else do we have? We have Samaru. Any plans to do another Zoom call? I tried to keep my comments brief on this first Zoom since so many people were waiting. Yeah, we were going to have another one in 3 or 4 months. We were talking about what's next, how we should go upon the Zoom meetings for this, and we were thinking maybe once every 3 months or something like that. Maybe we could do one. So, anyways, there's going to be another one, that's for sure. And what we'll try to do is, alternate the questions and what we want to know about you and the hobby, so that we learn more about everyone. That's the problem with a Zoom. When you're 10, you can spend a lot of time. When you get 100 or more, now you got to limit the time because there's so many people there, unfortunately. Bob says it was a real tough question during the Zoom meeting to go on your go-to radio. For the longest time was my Greenwich Satellite 750. Before that, it's Sanji and ATS 909. Now it takes in PL 680 and SDR Play. It is a tough one. It's a tough one for me too. I can't say I have I love the Texan H501X, the 990X, and quite a few others. I'd say I would be probably it would be easier. Um, it'd be it'd be better for me to have a group of favorite radios than just one. Try my last name. Well, in French, it would be salade, but I don't know. I don't know how I would pronounce it. In French, it would be salade, but in Barry, maybe they're calling him Barry Salad or Salade or something like that. In French, I would say for me that there's one L only in salad, but it would be salad. Matt says that guy, Matt Kelleher, almost never has his name pronounced correctly by anyone. That's why I was impressed. I just went with, you know, what it looks like and how I would pronounce it. It's like, oh, Kelleher. That's what it looks like. Kelleher. I just went with pronounce it as you see it. So, you know, I got it right. I was lucky. Oh, Mickey Dalmage. That is so funny. Oh man, you can pronounce my name any way you want. Okay, Michel Delmage. You know, if we go to a bar here in Quebec, I'm gonna I'm gonna actually introduce you to my friends as Michel Delmage. And by the way, I heard my name um, pronounced by a screen reader. I was looking at. We had a talk about how the messenger sounded from screen readers because some people are, you know, quite a few of us of the people listening to the show because they're blind or have um, problems with their eyesight. So they listen to the audio of text and stuff like that, and we're talking about how good the messenger must sound read to you by a computer screen reader of some sort. So I let it play through Microsoft Edge, playing text or reading text on the PDF, and it was just so funny because every time the screen reader went to my name, it was Gillis. So I'm Gillis, according to screen readers. uh, Bluegrass Dan, the Zoom recordings of Winterfest was worth much more than the price of admission. Oh, that that Shortwave festival was totally worth much more than what it cost for admission. Definitely. VT Radio, Paul, he was impressed with the CIDX newsletter. Cool, cool. I think we got a few subscribers, so hope you might be thinking about it. It's definitely a nice little bulletin. It's very professionally made for a club bulletin, honestly. That's what always impresses me of the CIDX. I've had a lot of club bulletins over the years, and I got to say the messenger is very well made. Samedi, TVDXer, fais attention à toi. JD Dakota, enjoy the CIDX newsletter that was sent out. Cool. John Beckham, my adopted 5-year-old Calico Daisy is happy to be with me more and more each day. Cool. Cool. Pirate on 6925 upper sideband. Let's see if I'm hearing anything. As I have a background of. Yeah, it's there. Hearing it. Hearing the pirate, 6925 upper sideband, pirate alert, pirate alert. Yeah, Slabfest sounds like the Three Stooges. Ow. Ow. Mike Leone, I live in a very noisy environment. Propagation affects radio signals. With that in mind, doesn't it also affect the level of noise? I can hear the noise fading in and out on occasion. We're going to go into that in just a few minutes. I'm almost only 5 minutes behind. I'm almost down, and we're going to talk about this in all of that. Salad day. Okay, salad day, Barry. Salad day. Yeah, that sounds right. Zen Pharaohs. Have you seen episode 3 of season 2 of Au Service de la France? It is about French and Quebecois speaking to each other. No, I've not seen that, but I've seen a lot of things about French and French Quebecois people speaking to each other. Zen Pharaohs, Radio Romania 9730. Really good propagation tonight. So, WF7I Ombrew. I heard lots of people pronouncing your name as Jill, and a few said Gilles. It's not a typical English name, so I have to concentrate to say it right. The problem is the soft G in it, because in English, it's the G is always hard. It's like Jill. It's a rough one. Where this one is a soft one. So it's J. It's really soft to say Gilles. And it's not something we're used to in the English language, in the pronunciation itself. And of course, anybody seeing my name in English doesn't have no idea how to pronounce that thing. So I would have been curious to hear myself on Voice of Mongolia how they pronounce my name. Thunder, been listening to my ham radio, and I can hear hams in California. Curious, what can I do to hear hams in the East? It's maybe it's the time and the frequencies you're using much more than anything else. If you're hearing all the way to the West Coast, you're capable of hearing to the East also, unless your antenna is very directional. So 9730 Radio Romania International. Here we go. Let's try it out. 9730. Very strong signal, definitely. Look at that. And at this time, they're in French on 7375. That's the French version of Radio Romania 7375. They're supposed to be on 9550, but they're not. They're missing. So I'm guessing they must have some transmitter issues still, because not all of their frequencies are used. Keith Abbott, nice to have you here. And Dr. Sisop, yeah, 9940 was coming in well this afternoon. If I try it now, that's very powerful. Extremely powerful. This is 9940. So it is definitely there. Very powerful tonight, 9940. Amazing. Amazing to see that. And just checking out here. I'm not getting 25. But that's 20 megahertz, 20,000 kilohertz. And the sun here is set about 2 hours ago. And I am getting WWV on 20,000. So it's pretty surprising. Propagation is definitely good thanks to the higher solar flux. That's for sure. What else do we have? So I'm just going to stop here as I'm down the chat. We're going to talk about a few things about propagation. So we had questions tonight about propagation due to solar activity. One question in the chat, two questions in the chat room with that. One is about the noise. One is about the how do I detect what's, if there's something happening. So I'm going to start with just talking to the basics of solar activity, and we're going to go to just the basics of it. It's a very complex thing, and there's way more to what I'm going to just say here. So the sun has a 11-year cycle. It's something that, if you're a shortwave listener, I bet you that unless you had some astronomy class or unless you're interested in astronomy, some of you might, and that actually happened to me. I learned that the sun had a solar cycle thanks to shortwave radio, because at some point, somewhere, somebody talked about the solar cycle and propagation in the sun. So this is the first thing that is probably unique to shortwave radio, is that it has and is dependent on the sun's activity. And it's something you don't know. And, I always told that joke about how I took down 100 feet of wire because I thought it was broken. But in reality, it was because I just didn't understand that one day the sun probably had some solar flare or there was some geomagnetic activity and the signals weren't there. But you don't know that. When you're new to it, it's like you have no idea that the sun has an effect on the signals you hear on shortwave. You don't know that. It's you learn it later, and it's like, oh, look at that. There's an interaction with the sun, and I don't even know if I kind of understood honestly that the sun was responsible for, if I listen, like if I look at my first year or two of shortwave listening, I don't think for the first year at least I understood or realized that the difference of frequencies we listen to in the daytime and the nighttime were due to the sun. I just went with it like, oh, that's the way it is. So the reason shortwave exists and the properties of shortwave is because of the ionosphere, and the ionosphere exists because of solar radiation mostly. And what happens is that in the daytime, of course, the sun is up, so it has maximum radiation from the sun, and the ionosphere will actually separate into different layers. In the nighttime, the layers kind of get into one big general layer, and that's why propagation changes and shifts. Why do we hear medium wave signals at night from far away, but not in the daytime? Well, in the daytime, when the sun gets up, there's a D layer that is actually formed. That D layer absorbs all the frequencies below a certain frequency. It is the lowest usable frequency, basically. There's a limit where, yeah, depending on what you're gonna, the angle of transmission and the power and all of that, there's a limit where you can't anymore. So in the daytime, we have just ground waves on medium wave. Nighttime, D layer disappears, no more absorption, and medium wave signals act like shortwave signals and bounce off and propagate far away. So that's the simplistic way of talking about it. And of course, the different layers are different altitudes. So depending on the frequency, you will bounce off a signal at a different altitude. That also means that the higher the bounce, the bigger the skip distance you can make. So you can make greater distances with just one hop. And there's all sorts of things like that happening with propagation and solar activity. Now, today we had, let's talk about this week and relate it to propagation. So we're in the uptick of solar cycle 25. We're still at the beginning. We still got a few years before it's at maximum. But it's starting to get higher and higher at a pretty good pace. What happens is the more active the sun is, the more solar radiation reaches us, the more the ionosphere is ionized and is capable of high frequency propagation. So what happens is higher solar flux like we have, you can pretty much correlate the solar flux number to the ionization and the frequencies that will propagate off of shortwave. And the higher the solar flux, the higher the frequency is going to propagate and bounce off the ionosphere. The stronger ionization will also help weaker signals be even more powerful at your receiving end because there's less loss and less absorption, and more of that signal is actually bounced off and back to you. So you'll hear a signal that usually you might hear just, at a fair level, but higher solar activity and higher ionization will make that signal bounce better. And actually now it becomes at a good listening level, if you want. So one of the questions in the chat room is the noise. Yes, definitely the sun creates noise, but it doesn't create noise necessarily all the time evenly. There is part of our static that we hear every day that is definitely noise generated by the sun. There's also atmospheric noise created by, the interaction of the atoms in the atmosphere and all of that, and the ionosphere, and of course our man-made noise, which is definitely the biggest noisemaker most of the time. So when we hear noise on the radio, sometimes people will say, well, I got a higher noise today. Chances are 90% of the time it's really a local thing to you. Man-made noise is the dominant noise today. It would have been different if we would have had this show in 1975. It would have been different because in 1975, man-made noise from homes was so low that that's probably not what I would have said. But today, and we live in a man-made noise hell for shortwave radio. But that said, yes, absolutely, there are possibilities of higher noise level in the bands with solar radiation, with propagation, with what's happening. For example, this afternoon at 17:37, I think UT, X 1.3 flare. What does that mean? The X flares are the strongest flares you can have off of the sun. So that was a powerful one. What happens when a flare hits? So there could be, they call them there's different types of noise sources from the sun. So this afternoon, what I was reading was type 2 noise bursts. So you could have had some weird noise bursts or crashes, maybe like at times. Most of the time, it's like the sun is like a wave. It's like a wave. So you'll hear like a shush that will get higher, 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 and then move away, just like an ocean wave. Sometimes it could be crashes like, static crashes from thunderstorms. But when that happens, mostly is because the sun has some activity. There's solar flares happening, all sorts of things happening there. So the X flare created some radio bursts this afternoon that could definitely have been heard on any shortwave radio, as long as you're on the daylight side of the earth, because you have to be where the sun is to hear them. On the night side, nobody hears that. Once you get into the nighttime, the noise floor that you have is not more dependent on the sun because you're in the shade of that sun. So there's no more radio bursts from the sun that can be heard on your radio most of the time. And what you'll have in noise is mostly due to more local noise, man-made noise, stuff like that. Thunder crashes from thunderstorms far away. What's going to happen is that once you have a flare like this afternoon, so there could be bursts and stuff like that. But what also happened today? If you were, by chance, listening to shortwave at that time, 8 minutes after that flare happened, something happened. Shortwave propagation just kind of got washed out. You were listening to some station that was really strong. It probably just disappeared in almost an instant. Now, why 8 minutes? Because it took 8 minutes for the particles of the X-rays to actually reach our planet at the speed of light. So X flare, 8 minutes later, solar blackout, radio blackout on the shortwave bands. And so for about an hour, shortwave was almost inexistent on almost all of the frequency ranges below 30 megahertz because all the X-rays kind of, you can say they kind of destroyed and made a lot of absorption, like a really, really increased absorption of all the frequencies of the shortwave spectrum. So they weren't bouncing anymore. They were just all absorbed or just went through space, depending on what was happening. And of course, that is never very long. And so when a solar flare happens, you will have an immediate effect of shortwave fade out or radio blackout of the shortwave spectrum, always on the sunlit side of Earth. never on the dark side. And that lasts anywhere from 10, 15 minutes to like today, about an hour. I was looking at the graph. It's about an hour. An hour after the flare happened, things were almost back to normal. The time that the ionosphere reconstructs correctly and everything comes back to normal. But that's not the only thing that's going to happen with that flare. It will have also an effect, but an effect that is much more distant in time. That is why we're waiting for something today. So you might have seen all the news about, the cannibal CME the coming towards Earth, and that we're going to be in deep, crap because of it. A few days ago, the sun, one of the sunspots, actually emitted an enormous amount of solar flares, one after the other. It was like constant. I think I've read somewhere there was like 17 flares in the space of a few hours. What happened is, first of all, those flares were not that there were not X flares. They were smaller flares, but some of them were M, which was they were pretty strong, and a lot of them were C flares, which are the smallest flares you can have. But it's the accumulation of all the flares, the fact that we saw that most of these flares sent a coronal mass ejection, which is a cloud of particles in space. So multiple clouds are heading towards us in a very rapid succession because of the multiple solar flares, which means the Earth is not going to be hit with one cloud of particle, but multiple clouds, one after the other, which is going to kind of make the accumulate the effect to make it even stronger. So we're expecting G3 class geomagnetic storming possibly. Now we always have to take that with a, like, well, it might happen, it might not. And the reason why, solar weather forecast is a very, it's if you think the local weather has a hard time knowing what weather is going to be in a year, in a day or two here, solar weather is even worse. So you might hear regularly on the news, oh, a major solar storm is coming, and nothing happens. Happens very often, by the way. Because we have multiple ways of actually seeing what's coming, but we're not always sure as exactly how, what, and estimating how fast it is and how it's going to impact. And there's a lot of things that can change the way that all of this is going to happen. And you get to a point where, well, nothing happened, or it was very, very small, the effect that it had. Things need to be aligned in a certain way for the effect to really be big. But we never take a chance. A snowstorm's coming. We're not going to avoid talking about it because we're not sure it's there. We're still going to tell you, because if it hits hard, you will know, and you have taken precautions. If it doesn't happen, it was like, okay, well, the weather was wrong today, but at least you were prepared. And it's the same thing for solar weather. Solar weather, it doesn't show, but for example, here we have a great example of that is in 1989 in Quebec. We had a big power outage due to a major solar storm that brought down our electricity grid of Hydro-Quebec. And so that shows you that, a good solar storm can wreck, and can have a lot of problems. And the power grids are particularly sensitive to that because it induces all sorts of currents through the ground and through the wiring. Here in Quebec, we're particularly susceptible for that because our power is thousands of kilometers away in the north in James Bay for most of it. But a lot of the power stations are up near the Arctic Circle. So, not that far from the Arctic Circle. So what happens is that the effect of these storms is even worse on the power grid of Quebec. It's worse because we have thousands of kilometers of cabling coming from the north to all the power that needed in cities like Montreal, which is all totally in the south of the province. And you have also ground currents that are created. And here in Quebec, most of it is what we call the Canadian Shield, which is a big rock. We're sitting on a big rock. Contrary to a lot of, like the US, for example, that isn't in that configuration. So what happens is that here we have a unique situation where the ground currents have nowhere to go. And the places they'll find place to go is in our power grid. And so they've actually added a lot of protections and big capacitors to absorb the shock. And they've done a big job. After the 1989 solar storm here, they spent billions of dollars in thinking about the grid and how it has to be much more capable of accepting shocks from big solar storms, because it is important to keep the system up. And even, if it's not like this configuration, most power grids, most companies running the power grids will get the reports of, just be on the lookout because we're expecting some big geomagnetic activity. And the reason is they're telling the power grids is because power grids are sensitive to that. Our whole electricity, the current we use, is synchronized very precisely. And it's the way that it needs to work for everything to stay up and running. Currents that are actually coming from these geomagnetic storms through the ground and so on actually disturb the synchronicity. They disturb how the power stations are synchronized and actually working in a very precise way. And that interference, well, can bring down a power grid of all sorts. It can trip breakers. It can do a lot of things. But at the extreme, it can actually have your power destroy a power station totally. A 1850 Carrington event style solar storm happening tonight. Right now, while I'm doing this, probably in the space of an hour or two, we would actually be in the dark, no more internet, and it would be really bad because it will affect satellites. It will affect undersea cables. We don't talk about that a lot, but those fiber optics cables that are thousands and thousands of kilometers in the ocean also have and are affected by the effects of all of the induced currents from geomagnetic storms. Now, to answer a question about can I detect that on my radio? You will most certainly detect it on your radio when it arrives. If it is a G3 storm, if you're listening to shortwave at that time, you will notice that signals start to fade or change. A great example I have is in around 2000 when I got here. It was the first couple of years we were in a peak of a solar cycle or a downturn of a big solar cycle. I'm sorry, guys. I was listening. That's not even here. I'm trying to think about it. Was it here? No, it wasn't even here. It was at the other place where I lived before, like in the late 90s. So I'm home and I'm listening to Radio Havana, Cuba, which was on 6,000 kilohertz still 25 years ago. And as I'm listening, all the signals strong. I'm getting stations from everywhere. 49 meter band is, full of signals. And I tune around and I'm listening to some other station. I don't remember what station it was. I remember I'm listening to a station from Europe. And suddenly the station starts fading out. In the space of 5 minutes, it went from it's there strong to it's gone. And I start tuning around and I get Cuba. And one of the things that happens is east-west signals are often more affected than north-south signals. So Cuba's there, but Cuba isn't strong as I'm, used to hearing it. And it also fades down like almost to zero. At some point, I end up with a 49-meter band that is almost dead. It's about 10 p.m. at night, and we're in probably, I remember it was cold, but it was not winter. So, we're like maybe September, October, something like that. And the first thing that I think of is something must be happening with the sun. But, at that moment, there's no internet. I can't go online to spaceweather.com or whatever and check out what's happening. So I'm like, maybe there's a geomagnetic storm happening. I go outside, and I can tell you, here in Montreal, to see auroras, they have to be real bright. I go outside, huge auroras everywhere in the sky. And I remember I called my friends. I called a couple of friends, my brother. I said, hey, you got to go and watch that outside. Two of my friends that lived outside of Montreal in a very dark area, they were amazed at the auroras and how bright they were. And it was the explanation. It's like, okay, so when this hits, if it does, and if it does create a pretty big geomagnetic storm, what you're listening to on shortwave right now will probably fade off. Some signals will fade away, some will disappear. Some might be enhanced. I've noticed a few times in solar, in big solar geomagnetic storms, signals from South America, for example, that are weak, coming in much stronger than usual. And there's all sorts of weird propagation that can happen. So it's worth still tuning the bands, because you might never know what weird signal will pop up and be stronger than usual, even though the others are all gone. So you will notice that effect in that way, that signals fading out, signals maybe having this very wavery. You might have heard signals, often polar signals have that. It's a very flurry signal. It's like if somebody was shaking you while you're talking. It really, really flutters the signal very fast. Polar signals often have that because of the fact that signals will go over where, even minor geomagnetic activity will actually happen, because the Earth is a big magnet. So all of that is channeled through the poles. And it changes things. And you can notice that things happen. Same thing with the CME. Like at this afternoon, you might hear the signals fade out. You might hear crashes that weren't there before, that absolutely come from the sun. There's a lot of stuff online that you can check out. It's pretty amazing, the effects of all of that. But remember that a solar flare has a short, could have a very intense, but it's that intense moment is short-lived. So like the X flare this afternoon, everything got wiped out. But it lasted about an hour and things came back. A geomagnetic storm is different. So if all of these CMEs hit tonight as predicted, what's going to happen is that all the shortwave signals going to be disturbed, signal propagation going to be disturbed. That will be longer. It could last several hours. In the case of multiple CMEs from that took some time before they happened together, it could be a few days sometimes before propagation comes back. The other thing to note is that the X flare this afternoon sent a coronal mass ejection. It was pretty much Earth directed, which means we might have another geomagnetic storm, or at least some disturbances due to that. Now, that usually takes a few days. So what we'll have tonight is from what's happened 2 or 3 days ago. The X flare, if it does have an impact, that's going to be in 2 or 3 days from now. There are instances where it's faster. The faster the time from a huge solar flare to Earth, the more usually it has an effect in the damage that it can cause. And an example of that, once again, the Carrington event of 1850, it's estimated that it took less than a day for the coronal mass ejection to reach Earth from the sun, which means it was sent at an extremely fast speed. So the power it had plus the speed it had, the punch it gave, was, you know, a very intense one. So probably a Will Smith of a solar storm of a punch. So, anyways, that's, you know, it's a very scratch the surface talk about solar activity, but it has a lot of effects that can happen in different stages. So, hope that some of you might have learned something in there. Okay, let me go back to to this here. Okay, here we go. Dimitri, I want to install my PRN1000 radio in my van. What kind of antenna can I use for receiving shortwave signals? For shortwave signals, if you have a kind of a whip or a telescopic, that'd be better. You know, the good old days of cars and trucks with their telescopic whip for FM, you could use that and it wasn't too bad usually. But it's a tough one in a vehicle. It could be a tough one for an antenna, and also the noise of your truck also can be a problem. That's also something to look at: how much noise the vehicle is making. Dwayne got New Zealand 15720 in Tennessee. Greg says I'm funny. Dr. Sisab, while CHO on 14670 now, very faint. Matt, slight WWV 20 megahertz in Denver. Very slight 25. Let's check it out. Matt has RWM time signal from Russia on both 14996 and 9996 here. Currently a steady signal without break. 14996 stronger. I don't think I've gotten that one in the evening before. Yeah, it could be actually skipping over the North Pole. That would be one thing. Let me try it here. So I got WWV on 20 megahertz still at almost 02 UTC right now. Pretty amazing. That's 20 megahertz. Pretty amazing. Let me try 25 again. Oh, 25 isn't there. Okay. Let's try RWM 14996. Am I getting anything from there? CW. Here we go. Nope. I do see WWV very well on 15. 9996. Nope. Maybe very. Let me try something here. Under this. And this. Nope. I'm hearing it slightly. You guys can hear it maybe. 4996. If you hear the slight fast pips in the audio. So I've got RWM on 4996, which is the time signal of Moscow, Russia. Let's try the buzzer. 4625. Yeah, hearing it very weak. There is a buzzer. So very slight buzzer in 4625. So definitely interesting propagation tonight, for sure, with the high solar flux. Let me try 15720 here. It's there. It's there for Radio New Zealand. It's not very strong, but it's there. I can see a peep, although the audio isn't strong enough. I could definitely see Radio New Zealand 15720. Pretty nice. Dimitri, most stations I use to listen on AM and search waveband, I see a lot of ham people using in the vehicle. Yeah, maybe a ham antenna would be nice. What else do we have? What else do we have? Hey, Bobby Burgess. I've not even seen reports of the RWM time signal being jammed at all. The only jamming I've heard is on military frequencies and on the buzzer. But I've seen no reports at all of RWM jammed. Well, Dr. Sisop, maybe it is jammed. Maybe the jamming's skipping over you. That's a different thing. Sometimes that's happened here. What happens with the Cuban jamming on WRMI or even Radio Marti is that sometimes I hear the jamming, sometimes I hear just the station, sometimes there's kind of a mix. Keegan has CHU S5 out of S5 on 14670. 17855 is Radio Exterior de España, RGA Dakota. They're the summer frequency. It's the summer frequency. Or oral, Brian. Yeah. What else do we have? Matt says the K2 sobering to think that the sun's so far away that it takes 8 minutes for light to reach us. Definitely, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. As quiet as a mouse. Yeah, auroral flutter. Auroral flutter. The auroral flutter is the distortion of the radio signal because the ionosphere changes so fast when geomagnetic activity ramps up. It creates such a fast change in the organization of the ionosphere. It creates that auroral flutter. It creates that trembling sound because the ionosphere is like reacting very fast to what's happening. What else do we have? Yeah, we got regular buzzer listeners here. Depends on. I listen to it regularly just for the fun of propagation mostly. Barry, the sun threw up. Pretty much. Take care, Greg. Yes, we'll see you Saturday. Absolutely. The power stations do not affect shortwave. It's the other way around. It's the geomagnetic activity that affects the power station. Power stations do not affect shortwave. It's like HARP. It's such a small power output compared to what the Earth's power is of just a storm that it can't change anything. It can't create, Yep, any long length of wire works as an antenna. Absolutely. In general, the line of sight stuff is not affected much by geomagnetic storms. What is shortwave or any signal coming from satellites, GPS? For example, in a GPS, a G3, if you guys have a GPS that you can actually see its precision, turn it on now as it's quiet and look at your GPS positioning in the most. If we do get a very strong geomagnetic storm tonight, when it's at the strongest, look at your GPS again. You're going to see that it shifts the precision of the GPS. It can be bad enough that it actually tells you that you're much, much further away in reality, for sure. Dimitri, how long this magnetic storm are happening in the century? Hopefully, it's just temporary events. So geomagnetic storms are temporary. They last from a couple of hours to maybe a few days in some cases, the worst cases. But in a time where solar activity is increasing like now, we'll see more of those. We'll see more of those because there will be more sunspots and more solar flares happening during the high peak of the solar cycle. What is mostly important is the strength. We don't want to have a Carrington event now, because it would definitely be a very, very dire situation today. Our technology is not made to go through that. Satellites in orbit can be affected. When there are really, really strong solar flares, actually, it did happen in the last 20, 30 years that some satellites got knocked off of service because of that. There was a solar flare that happened. I don't remember on what mission. There was a solar flare that happened, and the crew of the space shuttle was up in a mission, and a lot of the instrumentation on board started giving error messages and all sorts of warnings that something was wrong. And they went on the mission, and when it all subsided and went quiet again, all the instruments came back to normal. And it tells us that you've got to be careful, because there was even a in the Apollo days, when they sent the Apollo crews on the moon. I don't remember which mission it was, but there was a massive solar flare that happened just days before a launch. And it is believed today that if the Apollo crew would have been on the moon at the time that flare happened, they would have died from radiation sickness, from all the radiation that they would have absorbed from the energy of the sun. And it actually made them, they didn't realize back then, but it actually made them realize after, we got to actually be careful in when we launch for missions like on the moon, for example. When you're in Earth orbit, there's a certain protection. We have the Earth's geomagnetic field that actually focuses all that energy in specific ways. So when you're in the Earth orbit, even though there's a chance that radiation levels can be higher, and we actually see it with planes, when there's higher solar activity and you fly on a plane at a very high altitude, you get more radiation than in solar minimum, for example. And when the shuttle or the International Space Station, for example, when solar flares happen, they are somewhat protected because of the Earth's geomagnetic field that actually focuses all of those energy particles into the poles through the geomagnetic field, through the magnetic field that the Earth has. But once you get out of that, once you get out of the Earth's bubble of magnetic activity, and you go to the moon, you're not protected anymore. The Earth isn't there to protect you anymore. So any solar flare hit is direct on the moon. Here is deflected thanks to the Earth. And that is a protection even if you're in lower orbit, like Space Shuttle, International Space Station, and so on. John Beckham, remember the days of shortwave listening when we had the English language broadcast to Eastern North America, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Yep, there's a lot of stuff back then. Francis, more fascinating explanation of solar flares. Not going to do more research. You are a fountain of knowledge. Many thanks. Oh yeah, check that out and check the Carrington event. You're gonna have a blast of all the stuff about the Carrington event of 1850, and look at all the effects. Look at the 1989 geomagnetic storm that, of course, was a big blackout here in Quebec. Pretty crazy. Our JD8 Dakota, remember sitting in my backyard with my radio during total eclipse and found all kinds of nighttime stations and regionals. Yeah, solar eclipse. Here in Montreal, we're getting a total solar eclipse in 2024. That's going to be an interesting one for my radio listening. I probably will do a live show back in April of 2024 thanks to that. So no problem, Brent. Happy to explain all the solar activity stuff. John Becken, Midnight Sun is an interesting geological phenomenon indeed. Shorter listening from that latitude. Yep. And, we don't think about that, but sometimes people come up to me and says, how come that frequency is open to that area and it's dark? And you're like, yeah, well, 20 meters, for example, is open 24 hours in the summer. Why? Remember, the North Pole is in the sunlight. Signals can bounce out the ionosphere over the poles. Even if it's dark here, it can still propagate. Take care, Brent. Stay safe. And have a good night. Chris66, nice to have you on board. Joseph has 15,000 kilohertz coming in strong in Bay, California. Bay Area. And here's about Hawaii and Colorado. What else do we have? I always do a USB for the buzzer, quiet as a mouse. Yeah, here it's like 04-ish. 15. Radio New Zealand, summertime is like starting at 03, starts to get strong enough and good enough, and starts fading out around 04, 30, or near close to 05 on the East Coast. Take care of VT Radio. Stay safe. Hope you can fix your antenna switch. It's quiet as a mouse. I do this thing with my friend called DCRR, Decoding Creepy Ration Radio. Man. Dimitri, I think that all appliances inside the home are produced a lot of noise for shortwave radio. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Our JDA Dakota, solar flares could be affecting some airlines and their aircraft taking off and landing. Yep. James Binder says it was, I think it was Apollo 17. It's possible. I don't remember which Apollo mission it was, but it was one of the Apollo missions. It could be Apollo 17. The major flare was like days before or after the mission, but I think it was before the launch, if I remember well. And they did say that if it would have happened while they were on the moon, the astronauts would all have died from acute radiation poisoning. Something to think about also. Things that back in those days, the knowledge we have has grown a lot. Back in those days, they knew that those were strong, but I don't think we were, knowledgeable enough to really realize, whoa, okay, this is something we got to take seriously. Chastain, I think it was the STS-116 discovery, something to do with the ISS also. Yeah, there was the ISS also was there. Yeah, there were a few times. There's a compartment in the International Space Station that is much more shielded. If a really big solar flare happens, they actually can tell the ISS crew to go into that compartment temporarily to receive the least amount of radiation possible. Dr. Sisop, I wonder how all bands would play on the space station. Would AM, FM work? Shortwave? If you're talking about this, the signals coming from Earth, so shortwave, because it bounces off the ionosphere, would not go through, meaning they would not hear a station on shortwave because it would have been bounced by the ionosphere. Though they could hear, whoops, they could hear whatever skips through. So, for example, in times of very low solar activity, if a station broadcasts on a too high of a frequency, they could technically hear it because that would go through and not bounce off. AM stations would not be heard, I don't believe, on the International Space Station because all of that is kept to our little bubble because of the ionosphere, the absorption, and all of that. FM would work because any VHF signal that is sent is going to go through the ionosphere, unless there's e-skip and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure if you're in the International Space Station, I'm pretty sure that if you tune an FM radio as it goes around the Earth, I'm pretty sure they can get some stations. I mean, look at, they have the VHF and UHF ham station there that goes through. I'm pretty sure you would get some FM stations up there. Maybe sometimes a big mix of them because they're very high, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, we got someone in the CIDX club that actually does radio listening while she's in a plane at 30,000 feet and hears all of these stations from all over. And I'm sure that would be also possible aboard the International Space Station. That'd be an interesting experiment, actually. There, tune the FM band as it goes around the planet. Tom the Exter, scientists have uncovered a number of events in the past that were much stronger than the Carrington event. If when one happens now, our way of life will change dramatically for a long time. Yep. And I'm sure there must have been, the Carrington event. The only reason the Carrington event is known is because it's the start of our technology era. There are telegraph, and there's all these telegraph stations around the world sending in messages. Well, these relied on very, very long wires. So when that 1850 Carrington event happened, some of the wireless stations, not wireless, but some of the telegraph stations actually caught fire because there was sparking all over the place from all the wires coming in that were so long. The induced currents would just spark everything. A lot of operators were zapped, they had electrocuted by the electricity induced in the wires. So it looks funny, but it wasn't. It's not that funny. But imagine today, and that was such an event that the auroras, back in that 1850, there's still the people out west looking for gold and stuff, the gold diggers and whatever. They were convinced that the sun was rising. The auroras were so intense that it was almost like daylight for some at some point. They were even seeing that in some areas, people were reading newspapers in midnight, in middle of the night, because it was so clear that they had enough light to read the newspaper. Imagine how bright the auroras must have been. And of course, there's all the accounts of people seeing auroras, like in Hawaii or in Cuba, where the Caribbean doesn't see auroras very often. If you see an aurora in Cuba, I think we're having a hell of a geomagnetic storm. And in places as far south as that, we're seeing auroras. It was pretty crazy. Let's go down here. So I'm sure there probably must have been some stronger some stronger geomagnetic storming than the Carrington event in the past, for sure. And we got to take that into account because today's technology is sensitive to that. Very strong, a Carrington event today, just that would be devastating. We'd be thrown back to the to the old days, and for a while too. Take care, Tristan. Stay safe. Keegan says my dad W9JF took photos of the solar eclipse August 21st, 2017 with his Sony camera. Only to find out the memory card was not inside. Oh God, that's so sad. Kamikaze 1976. No problem. Nice to have you here. At least it was nice to see you on the Zoom. Christian Marcoux, fais attention à toi. Take care. Metalunar, I mentioned last time, but on the topic of noise in a home, I have never heard worse noise than when I was using a network power line adapter. Unbelievable how loud and pervasive it was. Yep, it's pretty crazy. Take care, Francis Moore. Always nice to have you on board, and take care. See you soon, my friend. Always nice to have you here. Zen Faro 6105 NHK from France. Always a good signal. What else do we have? Sheldon Harvey, nice to have you here from Greenfield Park, Quebec. Can you do FM with shortwave? Yeah, you got to understand that FM is a mode of transmission. Unfortunately, the way, especially here in North America, the way we were brought out with our radios, the way we grew up with the kind of a knowledge of there's AM radio and FM radio, two frequency ranges. So we came to the misunderstanding that FM was a radio frequency range and AM was another one. The reality is FM is a mode of transmission and AM is a mode of transmission. So frequency modulation versus amplitude modulation. And what happens is that they're just modes of transmissions. They're not related to frequencies. They're just modes of transmissions. So yeah, shortwave can carry FM transmissions, and actually they do. The 10-meter band, on the top of the 10-meter band, mostly from about 29,300 to 29,700, you have FM repeaters. You have FM simplex stations there that skip on the ionosphere with shortwave. When the solar flux is high like today, probably works. Actually, it makes me kind of think that tomorrow I should check the FM repeaters around 29,600 to 29,700. And those are FM mode. And so it's narrow FM because broadcast, like on the FM band, is wide band FM, which is much wider. We don't use that on shortwave because it takes too much space in the spectrum. So we have narrow FM on 10 meters. There's a number of FM to studio to transmitter link that are heard often around 25,800 to 26,200. Less and less today, but apparently there's still a few. I remember in the 90s hearing WFLA 25,870 from Tampa Bay, Florida. That was coming in so well in FM mode with their FM transmitter, studio to transmitter link, and that's how I learned about Rush Limbaugh. Because here in Canada, we don't know about much of the U.S. voices that you guys hear on the radio all the time. And I was listening to WFLA, and it was Rush Limbaugh all afternoon, and so there's that, and of course there's some FM. There's some FMCBs, mostly in Europe. Europe has a lot of FMCBing, which was never here. Now that, of course, the FCC has said, "Yep, it's cool." It's cool, but yeah. So you can do FM on shortwave, absolutely. Yeah, Sirius XM would work. They are geostationary satellites, so they're much higher up than the space station is. So, but like I said, Keegan, be careful because there's the FM band, but there's also FM. FM is a transmission mode, and FM does exist on the shortwave bands also. John Beck, a medium wave broadcast tonight with the increased solar flare activity is pretty good tonight as well. Take care, Skoyat as a mouse. What do we have? That's what we have here. It's going down. Dimitri, I can believe that many people are traveled too far away to see the eclipses. Yep. Can't wait. April 2024. Going to be kind of cool. Bobby Burgess, CME imminent 10-15 minutes. Where do you get that information, Bobby? Just out of curiosity. Because it's rarely that accurate, honestly. Let me just check SolarHam here. I'm going to check solarham.net, which often has a lot of kind of curious because it gives us a little moment of when things might be. Well, K-index has just risen. K-index is 4 unsettled. And okay. So we would be in the time now. Okay, O2 UTC, interplanetary shockwave just passed the Discover spacecraft at 0140 UT, related to the M4 M1 CME events from March 28th. Solar wind speed currently above 500 kilometers per second. And the BZ component of the interplanetary magnetic field shifted south for the time being. So it is still very early and rapid changes in the solar wind data should be expected. A passage past Earth is expected during the next 45 minutes. Warning, geomagnetic sudden impulse expected anywhere from 0210 to 0300 UTC. So this is going to be interesting to see if we notice anything on the shortwave bands kind of happening rapidly at this time. So this is interesting. This is interesting. I'm going to be checking out those signals, especially east-west signals. I'm going to leave it on like Japan here. It's going to give me an idea if it ever fades out or something a little bit. So apparently the impact would be in the next 45 minutes. So I guess that's where you got your stuff, Bobby. No problem, Anas there. I'm happy to do so. Joseph, CB channel 6, 27025 coming in real clear on GP5. Rare, I pick up 11 meters on my handheld here. Cool. John Beckham, are you familiar with DAB radio in Europe? Somewhat, depending on what the question you have on DAB radio in Europe. Take care, everyone that's going. Merrill, KK4HFG, heading to bed soon. Thanks for doing this live stream. Have a great night. Take care, my friend. Mike Leon, I think if we had a Carrington event today, our government would probably blame Putin. Yeah. Yeah, like I was saying in the RJ88 Dakota, FM is a transmission mode and not a frequency range. Take care, Bob. Take care. Yeah, you could put digital on it, absolutely. Yeah, Greg, anything can happen with sunspots. No problem, Keegan. You've learned something tonight. Mode of transmission. And that's what I was saying earlier, Keegan. It's that because of the way um, we learned AM FM radio, it gave us it gave us the impression that they were two frequency bands, and we didn't understand and didn't know that, oh no, they're modes of transmissions and they can be anywhere. So it's an honest mistake. Yeah, not Canada for the CB. It's only USA. Absolutely. But hey, even if you have FM in Canada, I don't think no one will go after you. They just don't care anymore. Metalunar, I heard that the PL330, there's a mode to disable internal ferrite for medium wave and long wave and use the external antenna jack for those. I have a Texan, I have the PL310 ET. Does it also have a mode like that? No, I think it's unique to the PL330. And by the way, when you disable the antenna, the internal ferrite on the PL330, doesn't work on the external antenna jack. The AM medium wave works on the telescopic only. It's not through the external antenna jack, but it does work. And if you clip an antenna to the telescopic, it's going to work. But no, the PL310 ET is not does not have that possibility, from what I understand. It's really just it's like that. It's internal for medium wave, long wave, and external for shortwave and FM. DAB plus, yeah, I don't expect that to be coming much. I gotta say. No, I don't think the ferrite. I don't think the 310 has. I don't think the ferrite does disconnect. I think it's only shortwave and FM. I could check the manual and come back on that, but Matt, they can have 220 megahertz. They can pry it from my cold dead hands. Dr. Sisab, they've been using FM on CBN USA since the late 80s. First export radio came out with Lafayette 2400 FM. Yeah. No problem, John Beckham. Happy to talk. Well, you know, with a question that started all, and plus the fact that all the activity happening right now. And you know, if I had to add to this, be careful of too much. Be careful of seeing too much on the numbers that websites have on what is, you know, what they tell you in solar activity and propagation and absorption, and because there's a lot of things that are very unique to specific areas. You know, like I was saying, sometimes you'll hear someone say, "Oh, you know, he's like at midnight, it's dark," and say, "Well, there was a solar flare. Maybe that's why shortwave is no good." Well, you're on the dark side, and it's really the absorption usually happens mostly on the day side when that happens. Like today, like the X flare today, there's actually a kind of an animation of the absorption, how it increased and then came back to normal at 1737 UT and lasted about an hour. Do look at the indices, look at the stuff. Usually when the K index rises, you know that geomagnetic storming is happening. So the higher the K index on the websites, the more active, and you know, when you pass a K5 reading, while you're getting into the first level of geomagnetic storming, it will impact shortwave definitely, but it doesn't impact everybody the same. The closer you are to the poles, the more you're affected. The more you're close to the equator, the less you are. So that's why, for example, in the live shows that we do, sometimes we tune around. And you might wonder why me in Montreal, I'm not getting a certain station, but somebody in Florida is getting it like really clear. You got to remember that Montreal at latitude 45 is closer to the auroral zone. We're not in it, but we're closer. So if something starts happening, the K index, actually, the value of the K index varies from latitude to latitude and station to station. If you look at um, if you look at K index values from world stations, I don't remember the website. I should actually do a YouTube video on that. You will see that there are several stations around the world, some in Alaska, for example, some in northern Alberta, that will give you a K index of 7, while the ones south, like, closer to Montreal, will be like 5. And another station, maybe that is in the southern part of the US, will give a K index of 3. That means the impact isn't the same for all of us. It's the more you are closer to the pole, the more that index actually has an impact, the more you are actually affected by any geomagnetic storming happening. So it's not all equal everywhere. Those indices that you see everywhere, they aren't the same for everyone, depending on where you live. So I rarely look at much of the numbers online because I rather use, and I think everybody should do that. I call them my standard beacons. My standard beacons. That also would be worth a video. My standard beacons are a set of frequencies, whatever time of day, that I know I can rely on to test propagation. So, for example, at this time, here it's 10:30 p.m., past 10:30 p.m. in the evening. It's darkness up to Europe. What would be my standard beacons? I would see if something's coming in or if propagation's good. I would start with lower frequencies. I would go to the Royal Air Force weather station in the UK on 5450, Shannon, Ireland on 5505. Do I hear those? And how well do I hear them? Is it weaker than usual, or are they stronger than usual? It gives me an idea of what propagation levels are. I'll check other frequencies of stations I know usually come in well, whatever language they are. So, okay, if propagation's crappy, I'm going to try, for example, France on 6105. If it's super weak, when usually it's very strong, okay, propagation isn't good tonight. There's not as strong. Different frequencies will have different stations I'm going to try. The time stations are very nice for that. Try WWV. Where do you hear WWV? 5, 10, 15? When we just as the show started at 0 UT, I was still hearing it on 25,000 kilohertz. Pretty amazing. I mean, it was darkness here for a while now. So these stations, take note of them, remember those frequencies, and remember the time of day that you can use them. So the higher frequencies like WWV or CHU or any time signal, I want to know if propagation seems good to Europe or even Russia. RWM time signal is, for me, one of the beacons. If I hear them on 14996 in mid-afternoon, I know that propagation in the 19-meter band or 20-meter band, 14, 15, 16 megahertz is probably really good to Europe because I hear that station, which isn't very powerful. So there are frequencies that I'll always remember to check because it's going to give me an idea if propagation's good. You can also use these same stations to see the noise level. If you have high noise somewhere and you suspect maybe the noise is higher where you are, you take one of those stations that you might probably hear, and if it's in the noise or if it's barely audible, maybe you're having a high noise level where you are also. These can be used in multiple ways, but my way of checking propagation is much more based on listening to signals out there than going online and checking out numbers from whatever website that's telling me the bands are closed. And I'm hearing some station from really far away, and I'm like, yeah, what the hell are you talking about? That's much more efficient take the time to listen and keep a list of all the things you want to try to see if propagation is open to a specific area. Make yourself a list of some standard signals from Europe and from South America and from Africa and from Asia that you know that with good propagation at a certain time are possible. Gives you a great idea and much better idea of propagation. So, you know, that's as we have. What else do we have? Tell Turner with calling the band AM mostly a North American thing. Yeah, absolutely. Most of the world calls it medium wave. You know, in Europe, radios have long wave, medium wave. Here, it's really a very North America thing to call it AM radio. Matt CME just hit spaceweather.com. Okay, I'm checking solarham.net. It has the little update here. So it's kind of interesting to check out the updates and see what's happening. It's kind of cool. And there's supposed to be kind of a series of those hits. So that means that solar activity, the geomagnetic field, will probably be messed up even more in the next couple of hours, as more than one should hit. They should actually hit several at the same time. Dr. Sisop, what about the South Pole? Same thing. Geomagnetic activity is equal to the north and the south. It affects more the north for one reason, is that there's more people living in the northern hemisphere close to the North Pole than there are in the southern hemisphere. So there's like more. It's more apparent in the northern part of in the northern hemisphere. But same thing. South Pole also will be affected, and anybody get close to the South Pole will have the same effect that people living in the North Pole or close to the poles. Whatever is the south or the north, geomagnetic activity gets high. It gets high on both sides. Yeah, there's a lot of wavelength. Wavelength was very popular in Europe also I'm listening to a station on 46.66 meters. Okay. What frequency is that? James Binder, I'm new to Shortwave World, and I was wondering, do you have a video showing the best radio to get? I live near Chicago, so I know I'll need an antenna to clear the noise. I got several videos about radios and some of the good radios to purchase. I want to actually redo my kind of my list of best radios to buy at this time. So I need to check that out and maybe post a video in the next few days. Check for it in the next few days. I'm gonna even maybe tomorrow. I'm gonna try to gather all the radios together and do a some of my best picks for my best picks for a radio. I think that's gonna be nice. What else do we have? Bobby Burgess wants to nominate RJDA Dakota as moderator. Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Why not? I don't even know why it hasn't been done yet. And by the powers of the shortwave gods, RJDA Dakota is now a moderator. Welcome aboard. Now you'll have the ultimate powers of the shortwave gods. Here you go. Here you go. So Yeah, it's already done, Greg. I think it's already approved. The first CBs with FM mode should be available soon, if not already, in the U.S. markets. No problem, Michael. Always happy. And so here you go. Here you go. The shortwave gods have gave you a wrench. You now are blue with wrench. And you do absolutely. You should have been done a long time ago. Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's nice to have everybody here. So kind of a nice discussion tonight on solar activity and the impact of solar activity and everything, for sure. Michael Langer says Emily 30, Texan 330 all day for the price. Both together are definitely a great, great match. That is definitely something to talk about. So CME just hit Earth's magnetic field at 0210. This is the cannibal CME we've been waiting for. It could spark a strong G3 class geomagnetic storm. So naked eye auroras can descend into the USA. As far south as Illinois and Oregon. By the way, when they talk about G3 class, it's G1 to G5 for the strength of geomagnetic storms. So G5 is the strongest storms you can get. G1 is the first level of geomagnetic storming. So just to give you an idea. John Beckham, XH Data, see you on the 808. Yep, good shortwave radio with a single sideband for sure. Angpar, nice to have you here from Los Angeles. Michael says RSP1 SDR rocks. Absolutely. May3 potential for exploration of solar solar flare activity. This is a very interesting topic to learn. Absolutely. Absolutely. Richard Califano says, love the PL 880. Very solid radio. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So, guys, after 2 hours and 40 some minutes, we're going to wind down for the night. It's getting late here. It's almost, it's going to be 11 p.m. in a few minutes. So I'm going to go and take it easy for the rest of the night. Dabble a little bit of shortwave and check out the geomagnetic storm activity. See if it increases or gets a little too heavy. So we'll be back on Saturday with another show of shortwave, and hope that you'll be there at 20 hours Universal Time. And it's always going to be cool to have all of you back. Yes, as quiet as a mouse. I actually have, well, officially one cat, which is Paul the Cat, and which is the cat you see on the show thumbnail. But we also have, I have a female cat that is kind of off and on here, also called Mignon. Take care, everybody. Stay safe. Love you all. Don't let that solar storm prevent you from turning on that radio, because you never know. You might miss something weird or unusual in the bands also at the same time. If you are out in a dark place, especially in the northern latitudes or closer to the poles, go and check out. You never know. You might see auroras tonight, depending on what's going to happen. So take care all. Stay safe. Love you all. See you soon on the Shortwave channel. Bye there, guys.